Thank you for joining us today for ABA Civil Rights and Social Justice Chair Chat. My name is Rahmah Abdulaleem, and I'm the co-chair of the Religious Freedom Committee, and I'm thrilled to welcome you to this conversation. These chats are a unique opportunity to engage directly with key issues at the heart of our work in civil rights and social justice, explore the perspectives of our expert panelists, and spark discussions that inspire action. Today's topic is the report released by the ABA Task Force to Combat Islamophobia, entitled Speak Your Truth, an analysis of anti-Muslim experiences in the American legal profession, which is more critical than ever. As we confront Islamophobia in the legal profession, it is essential to examine how these issues intersect with the principles of justice and equity that guide the work of the ABA. We are honored to have with us Adeel Bashir, co-chair of the ABA Task Force to Combat Islamophobia. His expertise and dedication has made him a leader in his field, and we are grateful for his willingness to share his insights with us today. Without further ado, let's dive in. Please join me in welcoming Adeel Bashir to kick off our conversation.
Well, thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you so much for having me here. And I'd be remiss not to say I sit here as just a co-chair, but on behalf of our entire task force, which put a lot of time, blood, sweat, and tears into this report. So really excited to talk about it here with everyone.
Okay, so when the task force first discussed undertaking this project, what did you hope you would learn? How did the final report compare to those expectations?
Yeah, so I'll take it a step back, and really the conversations here originated with the report. I think was born a little bit out of necessity or a desire from members of our own community, our task force, and the ABA and the broader community to have a place to share their feelings and their experiences, especially in the modern era. I would say post 9/11. There's a sense of community collective responsibility that's placed on the Muslim community a lot, and especially in the post October 7th era. That's also kind of resurfaced itself. So the timing of the report and as well as the expectations, I think, are two things that coincided with one another. And in terms of what we were really hoping to find, it, you know that in and of itself, one thing we wanted to be sure about is that this was not a report meant to be, a statistical analysis or, an end-all be-all doctrinal, finding 15% of all Muslims experience this, 20%, et cetera. Really, it was a space to allow individuals within our community to express how they feel, for lack of a better way to say it, in a safe space, which itself presents some challenges, which I'm sure we'll get into. But really to find how are people feeling and how can we as a task force serve those needs, serve those feelings in advance and help not only fellow Muslim attorneys, but also allies of the Muslim community and really our profession as a whole.
All right, so looking back, what was the most rewarding part of this effort?
There's something that we were really shocked about was just how candid people were in responding to survey requests. There was a lot of discussion early on about, well, are we going to get a lot of responses? Are people going to feel comfortable sharing their actual stories? We had verification processes. We wanted to make sure these were accurate accounts that individuals were giving. But I think one thing we're very proud about is just how honest and open individuals were that made, quite frankly, going through the reports emotionally taxing, but rewarding in the same respect that we gave a place for people to speak, and the findings confirmed that the effort was worth it to put together these narratives into a report.
So you mentioned emotionally taxing. I can imagine that reading through more than 100 personal narratives was very taxing. How did you process what you were hearing from attorneys and law students?
This and this going back to even, what were our expectations? So going into this report, we had looked at similar studies that have been done over the last few years, whether it be reports on anti-Semitism or anti-Islamic bias, other, intersectionality or race, religion, reports, and seeing what different findings were and what methodologies to really inform our work. And so there, and we are all having our lived experiences. So there was some idea that there would be challenges put forward. I think what's really tough when you're reading these reports is the sense of loneliness or isolation in almost every one of the 100 reports. You have stories, and none of them I can pretty much say um, started with, well, I had a place to go, or, I had this support, this challenge will hopefully it was, overcome this way. There's the common thread amongst it, whether it's, kind of in the front end of the career or in the reporting and the bias aspect, is just this idea of, um, a man or a woman on an island, when we as a task force are looking at this as, well, there is a community, there are allies, there is support out there, but how are people feeling such a way that they're just isolated from it, and bridging that divide? I think it takes more than just one community or one person or anything of the like. It's kind of bridging that together really goes to the end of what we're hoping to accomplish with this report.
So many respondents chose to share deeply personal experiences. What do you think motivated so many people to participate?
And we heard feedback from people as well. I think my own personal experience in working on the questions and kind of reflecting is there's a cathartic moment. You know, Going back to that question of isol or that feeling of isolation. How often, and maybe you've had a similar experience or have talked to people, how often do people just ask, how are you feeling? Or what are your challenges? Or what's it like going through, day to day or work? There's a lot of, and I think it's true of, disenfranchised or minority communities across the board. There's a feeling of weight. I often, describe it to folks, the proverbial, you're in a race, and those images that we've all sort of seen on the internet and whatnot of, you got a vest or ankle boots, or you're starting from behind. There's something you're carrying with you, and the ability to unburden that in a certain way, I think really led a lot of people to, when they sat down and really thought, wow, this is maybe the first time ever somebody has asked me, in like a non-therapeutic session, setting, or maybe even within maybe it is a therapeutic setting, just what is my experience, going and becoming an attorney and work, because it's not similar or the same as a lot of their colleagues and associates within the legal profession. And I really think that giving that avenue um, is is helpful in just sparking the conversation.
Did you notice any differences in experiences across career stages from law students to senior attorneys, or were the themes surprisingly consistent?
You know, there's you know there's some differences. I think the feeling of helplessness, in the early stages of your career, whether it's issues with hiring or in a bar exam, from early on stages. I think in the latter stages, the disappointment comes where you'll see people a little bit more comfortable to maybe go to higher institutions, speak up, lodge complaints, but then still there's not that same level of response. So you kind of, the consistent thread throughout legal journey is just not having a place to go or common understanding. Another kind of consistent thread across that board is just, which was, having lived it wasn't necessarily surprising, but it is amazing to see how consistent it is, of just the same types of questions, the same, being asked to, respond for, 1 point however billion Muslims there are in the world, or, being a spokesman for atrocities committed, by different groups or ethnicities or political entities, not even necessarily in the name of religion, but just, that may have similar religion or, similar background. This complete lack of understanding of just how different the Muslim community really is, and um, you know would come to a shock that you can have a billion plus people on the planet, that all ascribe to or identify with a certain religion, but behold, they have different views and different ideologies and different life
Shocking.
experiences, different life experiences, and not every one of them, when they're kind of going through life, there's some aspects of the report, that always jump out where, not every single one wants to go into immigration law, or not every single one, has a full, background in Middle Eastern history, and on the fly can just, address nuances, when they're in a job interview or in a courtroom setting, at any given time, having to be on at all times, uh, not only practicing the law, but then also having to play this other, part in society where, you have to be, an ambassador, and it's the, that kind of collective, um, this dichotomy where you have this collective responsibility as a Muslim community, but as we found, this feeling of isolation, and it's that duality it's very challenging, to then just have to deal with, as we all know, the difficulties of just being a lawyer.
So that's a great point of being an ambassador for, your entire religion, of, over a billion people. One thing that stood out to me is that many respondents weren't asking for special treatment. They were asking to be treated like every other lawyer. What does that tell us about where the profession still has work to do?
Yeah, that what jumped out to me about that thread is the infamous Ruth Bader Ginsburg quote of, and I believe she was quoting at the time too, I'm not asking for special treatment. I'm just, or just asking you to take your foot off my neck. And I'm paraphrasing and probably butchering it at the same time, but the point being, a, a lot, a lot of what you will find, and what we found in reading these reports is, people trying to do the experiences of what every attorney has to go through, the challenges of law school, the difficulty of classes, taking the bar. It's difficult to get a job, prove your worth in a courtroom. All of these things. Now you add to that, a bias where, okay, somebody has a certain religion and they look a certain way, and they must carry with them a certain, viewpoint and belief system. And I need to, disabuse myself of, like, make sure that they are, quote unquote, one of the good ones, or, they fall into this box that is acceptable into what, mainstream society, would deem appropriate, or why are they not participating in, holiday activities, or why are they not coming to the bar, or and doing, things, of the like. And when you have that, what when you're asking for accommodations, or you're asking for, recognition of Muslim holidays or certain religious practices, the idea that that is special treatment when, really the perception is, I'm just trying to live and live my life in the way, when, anyone has, dietary restrictions. That's, a very common thing, regardless of whether you attach a religious label to it, that, should be, respected. Or even the alcohol drinking. If somebody has, substance abuse issue, nobody would blink twice that, okay, this is not something that somebody wants to participate. But once you attach that label of being a Muslim, to it, or it seems strange or out of the ordinary, and it's being treated, it's that desire to be wanting to be treated as just another person, and respected for your differences and different viewpoints, as opposed to having to justify or explain them and then being isolated and, otherized, which is another kind of big theme, um, that we saw throughout a lot of these narratives.
So the report discusses credibility challenges in courtrooms and professional settings. Why is credibility so fundamental to the practice of law? And what happens when attorneys have to continually prove they belong?
Yeah, that is it's a great question. I'm sure it's something that you resonate, having taught. We're in law, all of us, that are listening, that have been to law school, know, one of the first things you learn in law school is your greatest currency is your credibility. And a lot of times it's perceived as just being honest and trustworthy or reliable, but it's a little bit more than that. It's that you are an officer of the court and, carry with this profession, the and kind of an honest dealing, um, persona, but then a level of competency as well that, you kind of know what you're doing. For those that teach, I dabble on the side. I know, yeah, you teach as well. These are things we try to tell our students, all the time. Like you're going into a profession, it's about, representing your client and doing the best that you can, but being, having that candor with the court. Once you add in, so your almost your entire profession is built on that, and your credibility could zap in a second. Ask anybody who's been caught up in one of these, AI hallucination or non,
Exactly.
citation verifying. Because the complaint always there is it's not necessarily the use of the tool, but it's the lack of verification. It's always that it's always the same story. It's never the crime, it's the cover up. And so now you add this additional layer to it. So just to you know a couple of quick examples, and I think even beyond the Muslim community, a lot of people resonate because I know I've had conversations with female attorneys, attorneys that tend to look younger or whatnot. They always get the same: are you the secretary? Are you the intern? Are you I
The
know
court reporter.
the court
Court-
reporter.
yeah.
I know I'm a criminal defense attorney. I know the very first time I stepped foot inside a courtroom, I was absolutely mistaken for the client, probably the best dressed client the court has seen, and quite ironic because the client's presence was not mandated for that particular hearing, which I found. Just a very jarring experience. So and I half laugh, but these are the types of things where now you're talking about you already have this credibility gap of where you're trying to establish yourself, and you look across the aisle and you see certain colleagues, and colleagues in the profession given credibility, or if I use another word that I think people will be more familiar with these days, a certain privilege, of whatever is coming out of their mouth or whatever they're writing down is valued or correct. And even if objectively you were just to put two pieces of paper or two arguments and for court together, they'd be totally different. So you're battling that kind of asymmetry there. And then you add two on top of that, um, kind of a political layer. So there were narratives, where you heard people saying, you're being asked about, political events or their thoughts about, issues going on in the Middle East or and the like. And so then it goes back to that same ambassador, point of like, my God, I'm trying to sit here and advocate for my client and do the best that I can in my job, but now I have to not only overcome this bias of I don't look the part or I don't fit the traditional mold, and I need to brush up on post-colonial uh, map making in the early 1900s, or what happened with the Ottoman Empire, or otherwise, things that are just um, that and and what's
Beyond your scope. Just
and
beyond
what's
your scope.
and what's amazing is a lot of Muslim attorneys and Muslims in general, but Muslim attorneys are so used to that they have to, they're used to engaging or kind of trying to explain or disprove the negative and a lot of things. But you're just trying to, again, going back to that kind of analogy of a race, you're just trying to get back to the starting line and all of that. Or your physical experience of, if it's a Muslim man, should I shave? Should I not shave? A Muslim woman, should I cover or not cover? Personal choices. We all know this as Muslim. Like these are not things that are, um, monolithic by any means, and they're deeply personal and deeply spiritual, issues. And then just willy nilly, folks asking, "Hey, why are you wearing that?" Or is that a religious thing? Where it's like, nope, nope, I'm just a little lazy this morning. Yeah. You know?
Uh,
Um,
so the report also discusses the importance of mentorship and networking. Why are those informal professional relationships just as important as formal workplace policies?
Yeah, that is a huge one, and one I hope that the ABA and for members that are listening and maybe not as engaged with our task force or the work of CRSJ really take to heart because uh, and in the legal profession, back in the old days, our profession was almost entirely apprenticeship um, and mentorship. That's how you got your chops as being an attorney. Um, these type of task force are our task force, different Muslim entities, different social justice entities. They're what sometimes we have to stop and ask ourselves the questions like, why do all these legal organizations exist? And why our career counselor is always talking about networking. Yeah, sure, it's about finding a job, but it's also finding people who have gone through similar experiences, can help you navigate, can help you overcome challenges, et cetera. And so when you see these reports, and again to that theme of isolation, having a pipeline or even having an avenue of people that can say, so if you're a law student, hey, we've been there, and this isn't about you dismissing those challenges or overcoming them. Something that always personally inspires me is how this next generation doesn't accept the inevitable that probably our generation did, knowing that these are microaggressions or forms of discrimination that we just have to endure and overcome. Whereas, no, 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 I'm not going to be treated this way. But still, at the same time, there's always at the end of the day, oh yeah, we're lawyers. There's a profession, there's a job to be done, and not everything could just be about overcoming challenges. And when you're reducing those barriers, you know, it's remarkable. And again, I'm from the narratives and some of the accomplishments when you see people that have still been able to kind of persevere, excel in their field, be trailblazers, be role models. It's just a remarkable thing because there's just so few and far between, whereas it's not as remarkable to others, and maybe looking and saying, well, um, we've gotten comments too of like, well, why aren't there more Muslim attorneys that want to like be in leadership, and why don't they, as if um, there was this survey was sent around and it says, hey, who wants to lead a committee? Or, who wants to like that survey doesn't exist. What and perhaps it should. But really the question should be, not asking, why aren't more? It's, why isn't there more of an effort to attract, recruit, make the conditions comfortable? And why is it only being thought of as an afterthought? The intentionality of saying like, hey, we should have more of these voices if we're talking about these topics. They're so pervasive now in our society. They're part of everyday discourse. And if you feel comfortable enough to ask, somebody about their political views or their social justice views, you should also feel comfortable to want to be in a space with individuals like that in your profession, to understand their perspective and know where they're coming from, and not have this perception of they're all like this, or they all feel this way, or there's animosity and hate, when we are all part of a single profession that we all presumably went into because we believe in the rule of law and wanting to help others, and um, uh, you know um, champion on kind of a noble profession in this country.
So, although this report documents discrimination, did you come away with a greater appreciation for the resilience of Muslim attorneys?
Oh, for sure, and a big shout out to the folks in the task force that really brought that to the forefront and insisted that we have a question like that, so it's not all just one perception, or the questions are designed to just bring out the negativity. And so two kind of big points on that. One, and I believe the number was probably 10% or right around there, um, that actually put any type of professional pride and accomplishment. And I think that what speaks again to the point you were making earlier about not not asking for special treatment or a pat on the back, but really just to be seen as a co-equal member of the community that has, just as entitled to their viewpoints or ideas, um, and access to the community. So there isn't this desire to boast and say things beyond what the profession. But the other thing is really just seeing the inspiration there about we have it's been so challenging. People have had difficulty getting into school, sitting through classes, whether it's in their law firms, you know uh, it, what they can say, what they can't say, how they feel going into court, having to play these kind of different parts of, well, I want to do my job, I don't want to lose my job, but I want to be able to speak what's on my mind, but I don't want to be perceived as, having, associating or having to speak for, again, Muslims all over the world or in particular parts of the world. And still being able to accomplish big things, and staying kind of true to their identity, I think is speaks to resilience, but it also just is inspiring. It should be inspiring, and but that 10% number really should be. Again, we can't make predictive exercises, but I imagine if the survey was sent to probably other groups, ethnic groups, religious groups, I have a feeling there would be a higher number than 10% of sources of professional pride or things that they've done. I've also, was also struck too with just where the pride is towards not necessarily individuals overcoming, but also being able to represent their clients and being able to represent social justice causes, which a lot of members have gone into, of where the pride is external and helping others, as opposed to I won this award, or I was able to argue this many cases, or win this many trials or anything like that. And I think that also kind of a universal theme of a lot of communities that have a lot of immigrant ties in this country, and a lot of first generation ties, as well as this idea of pushing it forward, and your worth in the profession isn't just about you. There's just this collectivism, which I always just bring it back to the paradox of how you have this isolationism, but working towards helping others and trying to do more. And hopefully that's a universal theme that isn't just isolated to the Muslim community, but it resonates throughout.
So the report contains several recommendations for the ABA. Which recommendation do you think has the potential to be the most transformative?
Yeah, it's all societies probably advance with starting with their efforts in education, maybe good or bad, depending on how we're looking at viewpoints. But we can even see that with higher education and early education, and what their curriculums and whatnot, and all those debates going on. So I think one thing that has a real power of being transformative in a very positive way, at least in my view, is really offering, and it's the simplest one really to implement, is putting forward CLEs and education, of just exposing people to what are these challenges. I'd encourage everyone to go look at the report. It's not particularly long, on purpose, but it's hopefully comprehensive, and organized in a way that you can get a snapshot of, oh, I didn't real if we in the Muslim community are reading it, and we're saying, oh wow, I didn't realize how pervasive. Like, I kind of knew this was going on, but hearing these stories, just imagine if you're not attuned to it, how much you can learn. CLE programs can also enlighten individuals, the differences between, and something we talk a lot about in the task force, is kind of these definitions of what is Islamophobia versus anti-Palestinian racism versus racism, versus anti-Muslim bias, and always kind of looking for better ways to define these terms, because they all have different meanings and they all have different implication. You'll often hear people say, well, I'm not afraid of Muslims, I just don't like fill in the blank. And Well, fear often stems from ignorance, but also, and I use ignorance in not necessarily even the pejorative sense, but just not knowing. And what we've seen too is when someone genuinely listens or understands or sees a certain viewpoint, um, in a format where they're not debating, but they're actually having to listen, that could be very powerful. The other two I just highlight is you know being intentional and transformative in the leadership and mentorship pipelines, challenging in current times to put forward a diversity agenda and it not be stigmatized or be weaponized to sound negative. When we say bringing diverse viewpoints, that has to include one of the world's biggest religions, but not just that religious ideology. There's people behind that practice a certain religion that have different viewpoints and different life experiences and different work. Like that is the aspect of being put in. And if there's, space is open of saying, no, your viewpoints are welcome. We do want you part of leadership. We do want you as chairs of these committees. And it's not to diminish your voices, but it's to make us better and, the things that we pursue. That will, one, make it a lot more inviting for other younger Muslims to say, hey, the ABA is a space for me. This is an organization I want to be a part of. And two, the ABA as a historical entity of leading in the profession is, we talk about credibility, civility, inclusivity, and listening. One of the best probably qualities of an attorney that they could have is to listen to the question when the judge is asking, listen to your client. We should listen to our colleagues' issues and things that they're saying because it's probably important.
How do you envision this report being used over the next several years? And if we revisit these issues after 5 years from now, what do you expect to have happened?
Sure. Well, I hope this report will be the starting point for several of the initiatives that we recommend and maybe future reports as well that can help inform, how the Muslim community is progressing, but also informing educational programs and pipelines to, make our profession more inclusive and really educate and inform about the challenges that Muslim attorneys are facing. And hopefully 5 years from now, if a similar survey is done, we've seen progress. I think that would be a great legacy.
So, if a Muslim law students were watching this conversation today, what would you want them to hear?
That there is support for you out there. There are lots of Muslim professionals and allies that are here to help and support you. To get involved and engaged, whether it's with the ABA or any other entity, it's our responsibility. As much as we would like, these levels of support to take away a lot of the barriers. The reality is that it'll take collective action, and you are part of that, collective effort. And listening or reading the report is that you do inspire the generations that have come before you, the work that you're doing. So perseverance is a great word, and to keep your head up and to persevere.
Every report has a life beyond publication. What do you hope is the legacy of Speak Your Truth will be?
I I think I can speak for, the members of our task force is one of just being able to take on an initiative where we gave Muslim attorneys a space to be able to speak their truth and to talk about the way that they have felt in a way where years from now it'll become commonplace where it would not be a novel idea to sit down and listen and instead be part of a common discourse to say, well, let's see what our brothers and sisters here are thinking, and how can we help and better support them to be part of not only this organization but a profession.
And I will say to that question, for us to be trailblazers for other communities that also need to have their truth be told. I think that, somebody had to be out front really kind of pushing the envelope. And I do think that this report really pushes the legal community to really look within themselves of what is happening. So finally, after all the work that went into this project, what are you personally taking away from this experience?
I'm grateful of the members of our task force for stepping up, having these ideas, as you just said, and I completely agree to take on a challenge. It's not easy to solicit these responses, get responses, like you said. You can't prejudge what we're going to get, so you have to publish what the answers are going to be, and what we really take away is that these things take a lot of work, and hopefully they are the foundations of greater work to come, on top of it. So completely hope that whether it's trailblazing or putting a sand in an hourglass, one way or another, it's building towards something better, however someone perceives it.
Thank you, Adeel, for such an engaging and thought-provoking discussion. Your insights have not only deepened our understanding of this very important topic that needs to be addressed in the profession, but also reminded us of the ongoing commitment needed to advance civil rights and social justice. To everyone who joined us today, thank you for being a part of this important dialogue. The report can be found on the ABA website if you would like to review it in more detail for yourself. The issues we explored are complex and challenging, but by coming together in spaces like this, we're taking meaningful steps towards progress. Remember, the work does not stop here. It continues with the actions we take in our communities, our workplaces, and within the ABA. I encourage you to stay engaged with the ABA's Civil Rights and Social Justice section. Visit our website, explore upcoming events, and consider joining one of our committees to help shape the work we're doing. You can do so at ambar.org/CRSJ. Once again, thank you to our speaker, our team behind the scenes, and of course, all of you for making time to be here. We look forward to seeing you at our next chair chat and continuing this vital work together. Thank you.